Monsters have been the face of our irrational fears and captured our imaginations since the beginning of civilization. Like our fears, they come in all shapes and sizes and meet us in our nightmares. They can be physical manifestations of evil, serve as metaphors that reflect our current anxieties, or they can be cautionary tales about the consequences of man's meddling with the natural order. Movies have been the perfect medium to explore the darker corners of our minds and help create the iconic representations that we will forever associate with these movie monsters. So after about 7 years of silence, a little Xeno Easter egg hybrid featured in Predator 2 was about to hatch. With so many crossover video games, comics, and even a shared galactic universe, it was inevitable that eventually we'd get a big screen version of Alien vs. Predator. The iconic intergalactic game hunters, or the hive of insect-like acid-bleeding xenomorphs. Who would win? The discussion became a hotly debated topic that rages on to this day. AVP was about to answer the debate, and the answer may not shock you. It's the one with the bigger box office. Directed by schlockmaster Paul W.S. Anderson, the director of such award-worthy films as Mortal Kombat, Resident Evil, and Event Horizon, AVP takes place in modern day, and the story follows a group of people all hired by Mr. Wayland, played by Lance Henriksen for some reason, which makes no fucking sense. Anyways, a group of researchers find an ancient temple beneath polar ice, which has a dormant queen used as an egg-laying machine at the center. The Predators have put an arena on Earth and filled it with xenomorphs, birthed from human sacrifice ceremonies, to use it as a Predator proving ground, and the researchers have activated it. The concept itself is pretty cool shit, but the execution leaves a lot to be desired. For one thing, like Anderson's Mortal Kombat, this movie's rated PG-13. It's the only film in either franchise to ever get that rating, which really takes the edge away from it. It's billed as an Alien vs. Predator movie, but the screen time is dedicated to a bunch of bad actors that no one gives a shit about. The first two Aliens, and hell, Resurrection, are all populated with memorable characters. Nobody knows Alexa Wood or Graham Miller or Maxwell Stafford, and how should they? These characters are just there to die in uninspired ways. All I wanted to see was Predators raining lasers down on a bunch of aliens, and I would have been happy. After a couple silly-looking hand-to-hand combat scenes, a human and a Predator are all that's left, and they escape the temple, which royally pisses off the Queen. Queen, you get it. The two of them tag team the Queen, but she's able to skewer the Predator with her tail, and he dies as she dies. A group of Predators descend from a cloaked ship, gather the body of their comrade, and gift her with a spear before they just take off back into space. In a final scene right before the credits, the audience sees a Predator chestburster hybrid explode out before the screen cuts to black. This movie couldn't possibly live up to the hype, but it certainly could have landed a little closer to the mark. But hey, let's look at the silver lining. Maybe all they needed was a second shot and an R rating. Alien vs. Predator Requiem picks up immediately where AVP left off. The hybrid chestburster emerges, the ship crashes, and for the very first time, we're shown the Predator homeworld, when a cleaner of sorts called the Wolf Predator is summoned to deal with the burster and the crash. The Predator arrives shortly after a couple of xenomorphs are spawned from the hybrid. Not only is the hybrid massive, it's got mandibles and dreadlocks, and it can also impregnate human hosts without a queen. Does that make it a female? I really can't keep up at this point. The Predator and hybrid face off on the rooftop of the hospital. A bomb's dropped on the small town to prevent a worldwide xeno infestation. The human survivors take off in a helicopter, but the bomb causes a crash. When military personnel investigate it, filmgoers were finally introduced to Mrs. Yutani, as she's delivered Predator technology from the scene of the accident. This movie should have been better, but everything about it's worse. Well, I mean, they use more practical effects, and this time around it's a lot bloodier, but alas, that has never made any movie good. It is so dark, like you don't know what's going on because you're looking at a black screen. I think the reason why they did it is because they wanted to obscure the look of man in rubber suit costume that they got from the Pred-Alien and the aliens this time around, but it makes the movie almost unwatchable. And the less I say about this, the more time I can spend on the next two entries. In the early 2000s, Ridley Scott and James Cameron began bouncing around ideas for Alien 5, a prequel to the original film. Instead, Fox decided to focus on the AVP series for some reason. Lucky me. The franchise sat dormant until 2009 when John Spates wrote a draft of the screenplay. Scott must have decided it wasn't messy or obtuse enough, so he brought on Damon Lindelof. Scott wanted to distance Prometheus from Alien and let it be its own thing. Apparently he decided along the way that he didn't want to retread what he did the first time around. It was decided that the movie would precede the events of Alien, but wasn't directly related. Instead, Scott just claims that it shares strands of Alien's DNA. The fuck does that mean? The film hit theaters in June of 2012. It stars Noomi Rapace as Elizabeth Shaw, Logan Marshall Green as Charlie Holloway, Idris Elba as Idris Yannick? I don't know. Guy Pearce plays a 100-year-old Peter Weyland, complete with bad grandpa-style makeup. Charlize Theron plays Meredith Vickers, and Michael Fassbender plays David. A crew of scientists are sent into the far reaches of space in search of our creators. The Engineers, an ancient alien civilization that terraformed Earth and created humanity. The explorers follow a map to the stars and end up on a planet moon known as LV-223, which indicates to me it's relatively close to the exomoon LV-426, but I'm no astrologist. Anyways, the scientists find a big pyramid on the surface and go in to explore it. They find a chamber full of strange black cylinders that look a lot like the egg chambers in the previous films. Were they eggs in the first draft of the script? I suspect they were. The expedition has to be halted because there's a big-ass storm coming through. Two scientists get lost on their way back to the ship. Shaw scoops up an engineer head, and David secretly scoops one of those cylinders filled with black goo, and the team returns to the ship. David poisons Shaw's boyfriend with the goo before he and she make sweet, sweet love. Meanwhile, back in the hidden temple, a cobra with the face of a vagina kills one of the two lost crew members when, I guess he tries to, pet it or some shit. You know, like a scientist. The other has acid spit into his suit's face mask and he falls face first into a puddle of the black goo. Holloway is succumbing to the poison and begs to board the ship when Vickers lights his ass up with a flamethrower. Shaw realizes that she's somehow pregnant. Oh yeah, she's sterile, and she realizes she's somehow pregnant and has to go into the medbay to perform a C-section on herself. She finds that Weyland is alive in stasis and wants to live forever. Dude that fell into the goo comes back to the ship looking like some sort of weird space zombie. He kills some people and then he too gets barbecued. Elba's character tells the crew that the pyramid is a biological weapons installation where they were probably doing some sort of testing. And then the movie ends. Yeah, fucking right. They discover that the pyramid has a spaceship in it. They go back into the structure because scientists. David wakes up the engineer, who it turns out is a massive dick. He rips David's head off, kills Weyland, and now he's after Shaw. The captain realizes the engineer's ship is headed to wipe out Earth with the goo, so they decide to use their ship as a missile and take down the other craft. She realizes real soon that her little baby squid survived and is a growing boy. And when the engineer finally catches her, this big squid catches him and impregnates that ribcage. Shaw and David's head escape on the engineer's ship. Destination Engineer Planet. 'Cause scientists. In the last shot, a creature called the Deacon bursts from the chest of the engineer. It's an exciting end to a movie that really is beautiful, but it's one that seriously divided fans. For an Alien movie, Prometheus had plenty, but there was one that was conspicuously missing. I mean, how could it be an Alien movie without xenomorphs? The sets are built on massive sound stages, and most of the effects were practical and in camera. It's an inventive sci-fi movie that ponders some massive themes, but it doesn't seem like it has any real answers. At its core, it's a simple story with a whole lot of convoluted details that really don't amount to much. Any hopes of establishing a timeline seem shaky at best. Hopefully, any questions I have will be answered in the sequel. 5 years later, and amidst rumors of a Neil Blomkamp-directed Alien 5, Scott was ready to return to the slimy egg chamber that birthed his career with his third entry into the series, 2017's Alien Covenant. By the looks of things, it seemed like he learned his lesson from Prometheus too. For one thing, Lindelof didn't write the script, and for another, the marketing heavily featured the xenomorph. Or did it? The viral marketing campaign started early, and it established the new crew and gave us more insight into the events that happened after Prometheus, and the creation of David. Finally, I'm about to get some answers about the engineers, the goo, and what the fuck all of this has to do with the original Alien. The movie stars Katherine Waterston as Daniels. A fantastic Michael Fassbender and Michael Fassbender played David and Walter. Billy Crudup is a religious dude. Danny McBride is a pilot named Tennessee, and a bunch of other people star as victims. In Alien Covenant, a crew of scientists are traveling through space to colonize Origai 6, traveling in the Covenant, which is a ship carrying 2,000 human passengers and 1,000 embryos. The ship hits some sort of space storm and it kills a few of the passengers that were sleeping in stasis, which cues the android Walter to wake up a small crew of scientists and security. Daniel's boyfriend or husband, or who fucking cares, played by James Franco, fries before he's even able to escape his stasis pod, which is actually kind of hilarious, but I can't tell if it's supposed to be or not. Shortly after the crew repairs the ship, they receive a mysterious transmission because this is an alien movie. They decide if the planet can sustain life and a fellow human is able to survive in its atmosphere, they should go investigate. Talk about a cosmic coincidence that they happen to be right there in the same area. The cruise lander touches down on the alien planet, which looks a lot like a lost paradise, which actually is the film's original title. The Covenant stays in low orbit to protect the cargo, but also so that the lander was close enough. The team exits the craft without any protective gear, because scientists. 2 of the crew immediately get infected by airborne black spores that are a mutated form of the goo. The transmission leads the group to a crashed ship that looks very familiar. One of the infected is rushed back to their ship for medical attention. He and the woman carrying him are both locked into the quarantine medic bay. A little fleshy mini monster that bears kind of similarities to the Xeno and the Deacon bursts from the infected dude's back. The neomorph is fast and it immediately kills the trapped woman, and when it's already way too late, the other crew member tries to stop the rampaging neomorph and destroys the entire lander, stranding the crew. The creature manages to escape and another busts out of the throat of the other infected man who's still on the planet's surface. The 2 aliens start killing crew members when they're rescued by a cloaked David. He offers the few survivors refuge inside of a huge city that's just full of the charred remains of engineers. He says their crash landing killed Shaw and detonated a massive explosion that incinerated the entire population. But we know that alibi is bullshit. David wiped out the engineers with a bunch of goo bombs and performed horrible experiments on Shaw. Crudup's character kills the surviving neomorph, and then he's led into this egg chamber by the obviously not trustworthy David. Crudup's character sees one of the pods open up, and like anyone else would do, he decides to stick his big dumb face over it. Because scientists. He's of course incubated with a protomorph? Another pointless step in the biology of these incredibly complicated organisms. David tries to kill Daniels, but she's rescued by Walter, who confronts David, The two of them fight, one of them falls, and no shit, it's the good one. Another of the survivors is attacked by a facehugger. The protomorph, attacks the ship, but Daniels handles it. Then another proto explodes from the other dude on the ship, and now there's an alien loose on board. And you know, a hatch door's gotta be shut to trap it in the loading dock where it can be blown out into space. Talk about separating it from the original series. The android puts Tennessee and Daniels into stasis, and then it's revealed that Walter is actually David. And now David can experiment on literally thousands of humans. The end. Where did those little facehuggers come from? This movie kind of pisses me off in a lot of ways. Like, why did David help the two of them kill the alien instead of just letting the alien kill them? Especially considering he already tried to kill Daniels. Covenant retreads beats of Alien and Prometheus without tying up many of the loose ends. It actually left me with more questions than I had going into it, and it doesn't seem like Scott knows the answers. It's a gory entry with elements about it that I definitely loved, but at the end of the day, we know the xenomorphs too well to recapture what made the original so special. Also, it gives me a newfound respect for Prometheus because it at least tried to be its own thing. Alien's a franchise with great entries. In fact, two of them are sci-fi masterpieces. And it also had some not so great entries. Resurrection and the AVP movies are not too good, but the entire series is watchable, except maybe Requiem. Scott's a visionary filmmaker responsible for a bunch of good shit, but he's also had some serious stinkers too. Every additional film brought on brilliant talent, but it got further and further up its own ass and made everything excessively complicated. At the end of the day, Alien has become one of the longest running and most influential sci-fi series ever. As you can see, I'm really into the little small details, and I'm probably overanalyzing it, but I still want answers, damn it. I'm crossing my fingers that the last entry in the new trilogy is gonna give them to me. Alright, I've taken up too much time as it is. If you guys want to see more Aliens videos, I can do this shit forever, so leave me a comment. Did you like this video? If so, then please click the like button and maybe even give it a share, because seriously, it helps a ton. Subscribe if you want to check out the entire Movie Monsters series, and until next week, I'm Jeremy. Be terrible.